Hello everyone, and welcome to this explainer. If you're a CA student, a tax professional, or a serious tax aspirant, well, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we're going to establish the ultimate conceptual breakdown of Section 20 of the Income Tax Act 25. Now, this isn't just about mechanically reading the bare act, right? It's about fundamentally understanding the absolute starting point for taxing real estate in India.
Okay, let's dive into this. First, we'll hit the charging section, then move into the general rule of Section 20, subsection 1, and decode the key statutory concepts. After that, we'll explore the exception in subsection 2, run through some practical scenarios, and finish the whole thing off with a quick summary revision.
But before we even look at the law, let's address a really common misconception. Are all property receipts automatically taxed under income from house property? You know, a lot of people just assume that if you make any money from a building, it automatically falls into this category. Or maybe they think it's just ordinary business income. But under the Income Tax Act, classification is literally everything. And to classify it correctly, we have to meet some very specific statutory conditions.
Part 1. The charging section, gateway to house property.
In tax law, every single head of income has a gateway. It's a specific section that dictates exactly what enters that particular tax net. And for house property, Section 20 is that absolute gateway. Simply put, if a transaction or a property doesn't satisfy the strict conditions laid out right here in Section 20, you literally cannot proceed to compute any income under the head income from house property. It's the foundational test. It is the ultimate gatekeeper.
Part 2. Section 20, subsection 1, general rule, the core provision.
The statute reads, the annual value of property consisting of any buildings or lands appurtenant thereto, owned by the assessee, shall be chargeable to income tax under the head income from house property. Let's take a quick moment to just let that legal language sink in. Pay attention to terms like annual value, buildings or lands appurtenant, and owned by the assessee.
Part 3. Decoding key statutory concepts, breaking down the law.
Now, to really master this for your exams and your practice, we've got to deconstruct this dense legislative text into its atomic parts. There are basically 3 absolute prerequisites here, and they must all be present simultaneously. First, the property must be a building or land appurtenant to it. Second, it must be owned by the SSE. And third, the tax charge itself is levied on the annual value of that property. If even one of these pillars is missing, well, the income is not classified specifically under this head. So let's examine each of these pillars.
Let's start with a concept that constantly trips students up, annual value. Notice that the section does not say, the rent received shall be chargeable to tax. Nope. It says the annual value is chargeable. This is a crucial fundamental principle. Section 20 taxes the inherent notional capacity of the property to earn income. So it's a tax on the inherent potential of the property, not just a tax on a basic rental receipt. That potential is the actual subject of the tax charge.
Next up, the property has to consist of any buildings or lands appurtenant to thereto. Now, what exactly does appurtenant mean? I want you to paint a mental picture of a large commercial building. It probably has an attached parking lot, right? Maybe a garden or a private approach road. Those attached spaces are the lands appurtenant. Because they are inextricably linked to the building, this associated land gets dragged right into the house property tax net along with the building itself. But vacant land without a building? That doesn't fit here. It absolutely must be a building or land appurtenant to a building. So the crucial point is this next condition, ownership. The property must be owned by the assessee. Guys, this is totally non-negotiable. Think about it. If you're a tenant who's rented a property and you decide to sublet a portion of it to someone else for a profit, you are making money from a building, yes. But do you actually own it? No. Because the assessee doesn't own the property, that subletting income falls completely outside this specific charge and usually goes to other sources or business income. Ownership is the key that turns the lock of Section 20.
Part 4, Section 20, subsection 2, the exception, business and profession.
As with pretty much everything in the Income Tax Act, a general rule is almost always followed by a critical statutory exception. Subsection 2 carves out a very specific scenario. Let's walk through this logical flowchart together. Step 1, the property or a portion of it is occupied by the assessee. Step 2, it's used for carrying on their own business or profession. Step 3, the profits of that specific business or profession are chargeable to income tax. If all these steps are met, we reach Step 4, that specific portion of the property is entirely excluded from the Section 21 house property classification. It completely escapes this head of income.
Part 5. Practical Scenarios and Exam Focus. Applying the Law.
To really cement this, we need to see how these rules manifest in real-world Indian tax scenarios, and, of course, how examiners love to test them. Let's do a direct comparison. On one hand, say an individual owns a residential house and lets it out to a tenant for rent. This directly satisfies Section 21, right? There's a building, there's ownership, and there is annual value. Boom, taxed as house property. On the other hand, contrast this against an assessee who owns a commercial building and uses the ground floor as their own chartered accountancy office or retail shop. For that ground floor, because they're occupying it for their own profession, it perfectly activates Section 22. That portion is fully excluded from house property.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real nuance in Section 20, subsection 2. Look closely at the exact wording we discussed earlier. The exception only applies if the profits of that business or profession are actually chargeable to income tax. This is a massive caveat. It means you can't just casually say, oh, I use it for business, just to escape the house property provision. The business itself must actually be generating profits that fall under the tax net.
Part 6. Summary and Final Revision. Consolidating the concepts. Having a structured mental screenshot of this entire concept is going to be incredibly valuable for your exams and your professional practice. So let's do a rapid-fire revision, side by side. Section 21 is the general charging rule. Section 22 is the exception. Section 21 deals with properties that are let out or kept for residential purposes, whereas Section 22 specifically deals with properties used for the assessee's own business or profession. Under 21, the annual value is taxable under house property. Under 22, the house property head is completely not applicable. The biggest takeaway here? Do not confuse ownership-based house property taxation with the taxation of your day-to-day business profits. They are totally distinct realms governed by this very distinction.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, pretty provocative exam-level question, just to test your depth of understanding. Imagine this. If an assessee uses a property for a business whose profits are entirely exempt from tax, does Section 21 pull that property back into the house property tax net? Think about the exact words of Section 22 that we just went over. The profits must be chargeable to income tax. If the profits are exempt, well, that strict condition fails. And if the exception fails, the general rule of Section 21 regains total control. It's exactly these subtle, precise readings of the law that separate the experts from the amateurs. Keep analyzing, keep questioning the text, and you'll master these provisions in absolutely no time. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.